Hey everybody, welcome back to another weekly stream where we recap the science news, we have call-in debates, and there's going to be a little bit of other news items that I'd like to address with you tonight. So it's going to be a jam-packed extravaganza kind of a stream. So yeah, buckle up because it was a busy news week. We're probably not going to even have time to get to most everything that happened, but for today's show, I kind of want to experiment with a somewhat new format where I'm not going to do like the first half is just world news and then science news and then debates. I'm just going to go ahead and open up the lines for anyone that wants to call in just at any point, and then we're just going to go through the science news. And if we get a call, we'll take the call, see if they want to have debate or have an argument back and forth on a point, and then maybe go back to the science news. And then um, Leo Filius might join later, and we might go over my most recent video, the interaction, the conversation that I had with Frank Turek, which has been getting great views. It's almost at 5,000 views already, so that's been a pretty popular video. And yeah, there's definitely some thoughts that were still left on the cutting room floor that I'd like to go over because Frank brings up a lot of BS in there that I didn't have time to address in person, and it would be good to get all of the thoughts out before I go to Wyoming tomorrow. So yeah, packed show for you tonight. So I want to start it off with yes, obviously I'm one day late on this weekly stream. I normally do Thursday evenings. So let me know what you guys think about Friday evenings. I know this is maybe is throwing the schedule off a little bit, but let me know what you think about the Friday evenings work better for you, or do you want to stick with the Thursday evenings? I kind of like the Friday evenings. Just let me know what you think. Um, the reason why I missed the stream last night was because I had a debate scheduled at Modern Day Debate. So if you don't want to watch on Modern Day Debate, some of my subscribers say they don't want to view it on that channel. So that will be on my channel pretty soon, guys. It was a pretty wild flood debate. Um, in the guy's opening arguments, he brought up the Gulo pseudogene. It's like, what? It was honestly mind blowing. I really have no idea why he brought up the freaking Gulo pseudogene. It's a pseudogene it's a gene that was for generating vitamin C, but has been broken in the human lineage, and broken in like several primate lineages. I have no idea why he brought it up as evidence to support the flood. It was baffling, but the debate went really well. He literally had zero answers to any of the argument ending flaws that I pointed out in the flood. So that was a fun one. Look forward to that coming out. And there will be a couple other videos coming out while I'm gone over the next 2 or 3 weeks or so. So don't worry. It's not going to be like I'm not doing any uploads at all. There will be uploads. Don't you worry about that. Um, Also, during that debate that I had last night, I called out Witsit. As you guys know, I've been trying to get a debate with Witsit since like November, since we met and spoke in person, and he promised me that we would have a debate. But he said he said that he's trying to be really selective about who he debates now. He can't just debate anybody that challenges him, right? He has to be very selective. So that's the line that he told me, and that was in November. And since November, he has had several debates with let's just say not the highest caliber of opponent. And we're gonna just look at one of them, not the whole debate, but I just wanted to show you the intro to see, you know, what kind of very selective opponent that he is finding to do these flat Earth debates. I see Caden here. Hey, Caden. He asked, "Who is Witsit?" He's basically one of the more famous, more popular, and more articulate, sophisticated flat earthers in the space. Lots of people have been asking to see me debate Witsit. I have a video on my channel, which is like not a debate, but an interaction that I had with Witsit that Witsit has claimed was our debate, which is just BS. But this is just so funny. So just to kick out this screen, let's just get a nice laugh in here. And let's look at the kind of caliber of debate opponent that Witsit is. Remember, guys, he doesn't just debate anybody, okay? He's not just going to debate anybody. He's going to be very selective about who he debates. So let's let's look at this guy. This is from 10 days ago, right? He's still doing plenty of debates. And this guy, Well, let's just see. Let's just see who he's selecting to debate, right? He wants to only debate the best, only the experts, right? So let's listen.
But basically, you had a friend who was a flat earther, and then you saw me on InfoWars. He said you should debate that guy, and here we are.
Right. So that's all that this guy had to do. All this guy had to do was figure out who Whitsitt was because he saw him on InfoWars, which is Alex Jones's show online, which, by the way, is shuttering its doors. It's going bankrupt and getting its assets seized, which, yeah, very awesome to see because Alex Jones just literally just spreads misinformation and hate speech online. But anyways, so he sees Whitsitt on InfoWars and just says, well, hey, you should challenge that guy. And he did, and Whitsitt just immediately accepts. I don't know why he's so selective that he won't accept my challenge for debate, but let's see what this guy's credentials are.
Ideas to be like a friendly discussion. I want to give you a chance to kind of tell everybody like kind of who you are, what you do, or anything like that. If you want to do that before we get started.
Yeah, sure. So my background, I am by no means a government shill or any of those things, but I do have a background in the military. Before that, I joined at 17. I was homeless from 12 to 17, joined the Army, deployed to Iraq in 09 as a combat medic, got blown up. And part of my experience was that I had a TBI that came with acquired savant syndrome. So basically the neuroplasticity in my brain caused me to become a little bit smarter than I used to be.
Okay, so far, this guy's credentials is that he's a combat vet. Well, he's a veteran who was blown up in wars in the Middle East, and his injury resulted in sudden savant syndrome and made him a super genius. Okay, guy. Okay. Let's listen more.
And I started seeing systems. I came back from Iraq. I started building cars from the frame up with no formal training in it whatsoever. And
okay, so he got blown up, had an accident, and became a super genius that just intuited how cars are built from, quote, the frame up without any prior knowledge of how to build cars. He just like knew it all without ever having learned it because of an explosion. Okay.
And of course, in medicine, I was doing anatomy and physiology, and things just kind of came natural to me. And eventually I was in finance. And along the way, I started inventing and trying to solve problems. And some of those inventions I am bringing to bear very soon here. Actually, June 8th, I'll be doing a reveal of 4 different technologies at the Quantum Summit in Cape Canaveral. And some of those technologies involve space-based applications. So it would.
Okay, so now he's studied medicine, he's studied finance, and now he's invented new space technology. Okay. All I'm sure is 100% true and factual so far.
Be really inconvenient for me, of course, if space isn't there. And I really started to consider it from my best friend, but so I also have a background in forensic psychology, MBA from Syracuse.
Okay, now he's also got an MBA in forensic psychology. So he's developing space technology. He's building cars from scratch. He's got a education in medicine, in psychology, and finance, and space engineering.
As well as in the latter part of my career, I was with civil affairs and PSYOPs with the military as a whistle.
Oh, and he was in charge of PSYOPs in the military. Okay.
He won. I got out because of the vaccine mandate. And
he got out of the military because of the vaccine mandate. Okay, this is painting quite a picture.
That's why I gave up a 16-year career in the Army. And I launched my first company, which was Reaper Financial. So I've built an entire economic system and now 7 different companies on the blockchain.
Okay, so he's built an entirely new economic system 7 times on the blockchain. Okay, yes, he's a crypto entrepreneur. Why didn't I see that coming, honestly?
And I ran for president last.
Oh, and he ran for president of the United States. All right, no, this guy is totally grounded in reality. No illusions of grandeur whatsoever to speak of.
This year and closed it out early. in September of last year, as it became apparent that those gates were not open to me.
Oh, it wasn't already apparent that those gates were not open to you, guy. Okay, I guess you had to actually start your presidential campaign to figure out you had absolutely no shot, but at least you ended it literally in September, the year before the election year. Okay.
I'm very much removed from kind of the mainstream thinking.
You don't say.
Now, in regards to where I actually stand on flat Earth and globe Earth, and I want to be real clear on this, I do have a understanding of consciousness based in my background with my TBI, but also with psychology, and I'm looking to do my doctoral thesis on universal consciousness, which is
What? So wait. As far as his position on the shape of the Earth, whether it's flat or globe, he does have an understanding of consciousness and is wanting to get a PhD in universal consciousness. Okay.
essentially is that we are channeling our consciousness from the universe. It is not contained within your body, which is observable in double slit experiment, whether
Oh my God. Why is it always with these cranks and the double slit experiment? No, the double slit experiment does not show that consciousness is outside of your brain.
your light is a wave or a particle. It's observable based on observation of atoms and multiple other instances of human history, such as Phineas Gage, so on and so forth.
Oh my God, the double slit experiment and Phineas Gage. For those of you who don't know, Phineas Gage is that guy that like had an injury and literally had like a pole sticking through his head and was able to, continue on functioning because other parts of his brain compensated and picked up that function. He was still able to maintain consciousness because like some parts of his brain were still functioning. Again, none of this is anything demonstrating universal consciousness and has literally nothing to do with flat Earth. Like, why? Like, literally, Witsit is willing to do debates with the absolute bottom of the barrel, and yet he's got to be a little too selective to just have debates with anybody. Like me, for example, like just doesn't have time to have a debate with somebody like me. I mean, he's much too busy debating universal consciousness guy.
So with that, I do think that our human consciousness shapes reality. And from that, I can say that on a quantum physics level, that if we're looking at Schrodinger's cat, whether it's alive or dead in the box, Earth is both flat and round simultaneously until it is irrefutably proven to the
Oh, God. Damn. Okay. Earth is both flat and round, guys, because of quantum physics or something. Oh my, this is actually like the worst argument I've ever heard. Like, this is even worse than the flat Earth arguments.
the majority of our conscious selves, that it is one or the other. And that is kind of the angle from which I look at it. And I, of course, have my doubts about flat Earth. I also have my doubts about the globe. I am not a supporter of NASA. I'm not a supporter of Einstein. I think both are completely.
Of course, he's not a supporter of Einstein. Oh my God. How do you how do you even find a guy like this? How does a guy like this exist? How are there people like this who thinks, is the Earth flat or round? It's probably in a quantum superposition of the two.
Completely bogus and fraudulent. And so I think it'll be a great discussion.
Nice, man. That's a crazy story about the neuroplasticity thing, man. That's very fascinating.
I just love that. I love that so much. Literally just, cool story about neuroplasticity, dude. Like, this guy just like unboxed the craziest crock of BS I've heard in weeks. Like, literally, universal consciousness, the Earth is in a quantum superposition, and Witz is just like, cool story about neuroplasticity, dude. Like, he had not been listening to any of that, and that's just... Yeah. I mean, Witsit will make time. He will take time out of his schedule to have debates of this caliber. But then when I challenged him to debates 6 months ago, suddenly oh, he doesn't have enough time for that. He has to be very selective with who he debates nowadays because, okay, come on, cut with it. For those of you that don't know, okay, this last week, I was supposed to have 2 debates at Modern Day Debates. I had the debate on Thursday about the Noah's flood, and then on Saturday, James from Modern Day Debate was trying to get a debate with me and Witsit. Saturday, as in tomorrow. So I was supposed to have a debate with Witsit, and Witsit unsurprisingly ghosted. So far, still have heard nothing. I'm hoping that maybe after I get back from my trip to Wyoming, maybe I can get that debate with Witsit. Finally, I've only been trying to arrange this since November. I mean, when is he actually going to accept it? So yeah, I had a little pledge at the Modern Day Debate. I said, shame Witsit, message Witsit. Why aren't you debating based theory? Why aren't you debating Grayson? So maybe, if enough people can guilt him into it, maybe he'll actually accept that debate because it'd be really fun to dismantle all of his BS live. So yeah, I just wanted to have a little bit fun at the start of the stream. We can start on the science news now. And for the observant ones among you, you might have noticed to start this off that I've got a new prop in the background here. This atomically accurate DNA back here. You can't really see it, but every atom. I mean, I was really surprised. Like the nucleobases even have the hydrogen atoms in place. So like an atomically accurate DNA model. And this has to do with some of the findings in the science news from this last week. So let's go ahead and unpack this. And before we get into this, I want to remind people that the line to call in is open. I'm going to be doing it a little bit differently this week in that I will be taking calls throughout the whole thing, and we'll just pause the science news, take the call, see what it's about, discuss it, and then go back to the science news after the call. So yeah, I'm going to play around with a format like that for this week. So feel free to call in. The post is pinned at the top of the live comments. So yeah, the live chat. So anyways, for this first news, I mentioned it's going to have to do with DNA. We actually discovered, let me see if I can pull it up here. It's a pretty fun article, and it actually has to do with what we were talking about last week. Because last week I mentioned, or maybe it was the week before, but I mentioned that there is a colonial rebellion happening in New Caledonia. And in New Caledonia this week, they discovered a new, not a new type of fern, but this fern was genetically sequenced and found out that its genome is the largest known genome of any living thing. It literally just dwarfs the human genome. So the human genome has around 4 billion base pairs in it. This little fern right here, this little New Caledonian fern, this innocent looking little guy has 160 billion base pairs in its genome. Absolutely massive. I mean, for all of the advocates, like the young earth creationists that insist that, hey, 100% of our genome is functional, there's no such thing as junk DNA. Explain this one to me. Explain why. Okay, if all of this DNA is functional, you're telling me that this fern literally has to be 40 times more complex than a human being, right? 4 billion, 160 billion. It's 40 times more complex. It requires 40 times more DNA to get this organism right than it does to get a human right. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Makes no sense from the perspective. If you're a creationist and you claim that junk DNA is not real, explain this one. Explain why this fern has 160 billion base pairs in its genome. Makes absolutely no sense. Andrew here saying it does make sense. Another fern species also has a very large genome relative to others. Okay, yeah. I mean, there's a lungfish that has an absolutely staggering amount of base pairs. Ferns, there's other fern species that have large base pairs, large genomes. It's kind of a result between the strength of selection and sort of the population dynamics at play. But a lot of non-coding, repetitive junk DNA sequences, basically. And I just would love to hear an explanation from the creationists about this one. But that was pretty cool. The new world record, the world record has been broken this week for the biggest known genome of any living thing. You love to see it, folks. Now let's go with another news item that will make the creationists start sweating here. We've got a new transitional fossil discovered. I did cover this general type of fossil in my video on transitional fossils. So check out that video if you haven't seen it. I go over a dozen different examples of some of the lesser known transitional species. And I did cover sauropodomorphs along the evolution of sauropods. So if you check it out, a new sauropodomorph dinosaur is unearthed in Zimbabwe. So you can see the transitional anatomy there. Unlike the full sauropods that walk on 4 legs, here we have a 2-legged sauropodomorph, but its neck and tail are already starting to grow in proportion to what we see later. So its anatomy is transitional. It's intermediate between like a species like Eoraptor, a pretty standard basal sauropodomorph that looks kind of like a theropod in body plan. But this is intermediate between those really more basal forms and the full-grown 4-legged ginormous sauropods, the long-necked dinosaurs we all know and love. So new transitional species unearthed in Zimbabwe. I'm not sure. This could have been near the Karoo Formation. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, in Zimbabwe. Really, really cool. Love to see new transitional forms being discovered. And it's as if we just put out the bat signal. The dinosaur signal has been put out, and we've got our first caller here. So I'm going to welcome to the stage Dr. Deino, our resident dinosaur doctor. How's it going, Doc?
Hello, hello. Don't think I've ever heard of the dino signal before, but I might steal that.
Well, we got a new sauropodomorph discovered, and just like that, Dr. Deino appears before us. So yeah.
Well, sorry.
I was gonna say it's pretty cool of you to show up here because, as many of my subscribers know, next week I'll be leaving, heading to Wyoming to meet up with Dr. Deino in person to begin our search for not a sauropodomorph, but like a full-on sauropod, a juvenile sauropod, a relatively more rare specimen, a juvenile of an unidentified species somewhere in Wyoming. And we're going to be spending several days out there on this search. Correct, Doc?
Yes. Well, you'll be spending a few days. I'll be out there for 2 to 3 weeks.
Yes. And
maybe a bit longer.
Earl here in the comments is reminding us that Doc will be on Ride the Wave tomorrow at 11 a.m. So stay tuned and tune into that. And I just want to clarify that no, Dr. Deino is not a creation.
I'm looking forward to it.
His name is a pun on Dr. Deino from Kent Hovind, but Doc Deino is not a creationist at all.
No, so, I haven't been since I was like 3.
Wow, I didn't realize that there was ever a time that you were a creationist, Doc.
Well, and even then, I was an older creationist, but I grew out of that pretty quick.
So, any thoughts on the recently discovered sauropodomorph? And then I want you to stick around because there's another paleontological discovery, not from the Mesozoic, much more recent than that, but still very interesting paleontological discovery that I would like to highlight next in the science news. So stick around for that. But while you're here, I want to go ahead and just plug the fact that we're going to be going on this expedition together, and that the fundraiser is linked in the description below. So if you want to donate to enable this expedition to happen and for Dr. Deino to stay out there as long as it takes to actually find this specimen and make a really cool discovery, definitely check out the link in the description. It'll take you to the fundraising page. And yeah, considering funding what you can, because it's going to be going to a good cause, and any excess funds will be donated to local university. Is there anything else that you want?
Mind if I expand on it a little bit?
You seem to have a
I
little
did
bit
just
of a
want to
lag
say. Yeah, I'm sorry. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm in Iowa. For some reason, internet has been awful all over Iowa across a bunch of carriers. Is my voice coming in okay?
Yeah, no, your audio quality is good. I think there might just be a slight couple seconds of delay, but please do add into more details and round out the description of this upcoming expedition.
All right, sure thing. So, for anyone in this audience who doesn't know me, I am Dr. Deino. Like Grayson said, the name is a pun on Kent Hovind, and unlike that particular charlatan, I like to try and educate people try to educate people science. Oh, a little bit of feedback from your end. Anyway, I am also, in real life, a volunteer fossil preparator. And for the last 6 months now, I've been cleaning some dinosaur fossils at my local university. The problem is, we don't know where they came from. After months of investigation, I have it down to about a 2 square mile area, and I will be combing through that for about 2, possibly 3 weeks to try and find the original dig site that these dinosaur bones came from, because it's kind of important that that's documented. Anyway, the more funding I get, the longer I can stay out there and the more I can do. Paleontology is, unfortunately, a bit like gambling. Every day you go out in the field, you roll the dice and see if you get lucky. And the more days I can be out there, the more times I can roll those dice, the better picture I can get of the landscape, and the more I can learn and then teach others. So, as is, I have enough money to go out there for 2 weeks. But any support that's given from here on out lets me stay longer, makes, I'm trying to build up a bit of an emergency fund too, just in case my car breaks down in the middle of the desert. Stuff like that.
Very important.
And when the expedition is over, any money that is left is going to be donated to a local museum fund. Because the place I'm going to is where a ton of very famous and important dinosaurs came from. But, well, there's no local museum to teach people about that important history. I want to help change that.
I mean, it's certainly a worthy endeavor, and I am definitely very grateful to you because, I asked you if I could tag along, and you accepted letting me come along for the ride. And it's definitely, like I've said before, it's a childhood dream of mine to, go on a dinosaur fossil hunting expedition. I understand it's not going to be a full dig for legal purposes. We're not going to be able to unearth this dinosaur once we find it, but we will be able to hopefully identify the site and then walk us through what would happen next if we successfully identify this site. How would the dig process proceed from there?
Sure thing. So first, let me clarify that I will not be doing any digging. That might sound like a small difference, but legally speaking, that's really big. As in, if I found these and I started digging, I could be in a lot of trouble. So I'm not doing that. What I would be doing is contacting the local office of the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM for short. The BLM keeps an eye on all of the public lands in the United States and maintains them. Make sure they stay healthy and people aren't just, going out there and like doing a ton of mining without a permit or anything like that.
Yeah. Cool.
The BLM also is contacted with a bunch of different universities and museums that go out and collect fossils when they're found. They collect them, preserve them, and then study them. So I would contact the BLM would contact a museum, and the museum would preserve the fossils so they can be studied. That's the basic breakdown.
Awesome.
And
Well, thanks for
maybe
going
they
through that.
need help.
Thanks for breaking that down for us. So yes, it's going to be very, very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to meeting Doc out there in Wyoming. We're going to be starting in mid-June here. So look out for Doc's appearance on Ride the Wave. I don't know if that link was posted in chat, but I Killed Earl should be able to post a link for that show. I think you said that was tomorrow at 11 Eastern time. So go ahead and check that out. And then if it's all right with you, Doc, if we move on to the next little bit of science news with a new paleontological discovery. I don't know if you've seen this one yet, but are you okay to move on? Is there something else that you wanted to cover on the topic of our upcoming Wyoming expedition?
I have not seen any paleo news. I've actually spent almost all day making calls.
Well, good. Keep him busy, making sure that they're prepared for the trip. All good. Okay, so this headline really caught my attention, and I think that both of us are going to have, let's just say, some issues with the headline, but it did definitely get my attention. I'll say that much. So you can see here, the headline here is Prehistoric Giant Goose Skull Found in Australia. Not sure why they're calling it a giant goose. I don't think that there's pretty much any relation. Like it's a bird. It's a giant bird, but I don't think that it's a goose. But let's just scroll past the picture here for a second. So they're calling it a giant goose discovered in Australia. So it's a giant flightless bird that weighed around 230 kilograms. It's a big sucker, 5 times as much as an emu. So this is from just 45,000 to 50,000 years old. So this was coexistent with humans in Australia. Like the ancestors of the Aborigines, like dealt with this thing in Australia. And they did not have any sample of a complete skull here. It's been a known species for like over 100 years, and we didn't have any sample of the skull. So it's a stunningly rare find. We finally found one this last week. You can see here's the kind of reconstruction here in the bottom left corner of the skull. And they got a lot of detail here. And yeah, so here's what it shows. The discovery kind of unveils a little bit of features from this giant bird. It's got cranium and an unusual casque, like a helmet on the top of its head. So look at this artistic rendering here. This thing is not exactly a handsome beast, I would say. But why are they calling this a goose? Like,
I mean, because it's a huge. That's probably the only reason.
Yeah, it's a huge bird. I guess if you like squint your eyes, it kind of looks like a goose. But like, come on. I mean, I believe that it's in the same kind of category as like the other like large scale terror birds and like the large
birds.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know the terror birds. It's just I thought they all died out like about 1 million years ago.
So this one they're calling it a it's like an Aboriginal word for thunderbird, like a mitterong or something like that. And the type of animal it is in, I believe, the same sort of umbrella as the terror birds are. I think the name starts with a D, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. It's probably, let me pull up the article a little bit. I think that it should be in the article here. But,
I'm reading through a quote from one of the scientists who described it.
Yeah.
Aspects of the skull showed undeniable and complex similarities to that of early diverging waterfowl lineages, the South American screamers, and, a bit closer to home, the Australian magpie goose.
Oh, there's the goose comparison. I see. Yes, because it did have aquatic habitat adaptation from like protecting the ears and throat from water when submerged. So I guess that you could call. I kind of have issues with calling it a giant goose, but when I saw the headlines, giant goose skull discovered in Australia, I was like, this is too good not to cover on the science news this week. So yeah. But I mean, I can already see the creationists. Oh, there was more oxygen in the past, so the geese grew giant. It's like, this thing is not like a goose.
Oh, of course.
Anyways, I can't see
But
the name.
I'm really curious. Like,
But when you look at
I'm
the
curious if
genome,
this is a paleonave or an actual It is a Gallowenseriform. It is literally a giant goose.
okay, so you actually, I expected that you were gonna have issues with them calling it a goose, but you're saying that it can be technically and accurately called a giant goose.
Well, it's a subset of the Gallowenseriforms, which is the group that things like, I believe it's turkeys, geese, and chickens belong to.
All right. Okay, you heard it here, folks. A giant prehistoric goose that our ancestors in Australia had to be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah, pretty it just makes you wonder what those interactions were like. What I mean, geese are not friendly creatures. So, I don't know how ornery, like what the overall personality of these things are, but I certainly would not want to run into one of these Australian thunderbirds in the outback. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Huh.
Well, that's
very interesting.
the news in paleontology that I wanted to share. A new sauropodomorph, an example of a new transitional species, as well as this giant, terrifying goose creature. So, yeah. Thanks for calling.
Apparently,
yeah.
Well, just really quick. Apparently, some of their close relatives are the toothed ducks. Toothed at air quotes. They have large ridges on their beaks that look like teeth.
Yeah, I agree with Bridge the Divide. It kind of does look like a Canadian goose on a map. And with that, thank you for calling in, Doc. And I will see you later this month for our dinosaur hunting expedition here. I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, I'm very excited too. And again, folks, any donations at all help.
Yes, the link is in the description, and I believe that Pragmatic Crystal has posted in the live chat as well. So check that out if you have any interest in supporting an early career paleontologist and me just trying to find cool dinosaur fossils. Sweet.
Yes, indeed.
Peace out, Doc. I'll see you then.
Adios.
Okay, so let's continue with the science news here, but I do want to just remind everyone listening that this is we're having like an open call-in show right here. So if you've seen my debates, if you think I'm just way wrong about something and you've got an argument, feel free to call in. You don't have to wait until the science news is all the way through. You can call in at any time, and then we will discuss if you've got an argument, if you've got a question. The link is pinned in the live chat, so feel free to call. But yeah, we've gone through some science news topics from biology, the fern with the enormous genome, the paleontological discoveries. So there's a lot more in biology that we can cover here, but I want to just take a brief break and let's just get into some like advanced theoretical physics topics here because this paper, this is the kind of thing that I'm going to have to go back to and sit on for a while to really process it and make sense. But I did see this article, which definitely caught my attention earlier this week. So this was described as a groundbreaking quantum physics. Now, I think that that's probably a bit sensational based on what they were showing. Like if it turns out to be true, yes, absolutely, this would be very groundbreaking. But as of now, this just seems like a very interesting theoretical framework that is being explored here. So this was from the University of Vienna. They have a team there that's working on this. And essentially what they've shown is that they're trying to work with this new theoretical framework called magnetic quivers. And before all the flat earthers and the Witsit types that like to say gravity isn't real and it's all electromagnetic, in this example, the magnetic part is like metaphoric. We're not talking about like an actual magnetic field. So they kind of describe what is meant by magnetic quivers here, because this is the first time that I had ever come across the term magnetic quiver. So I'm trying to figure out like what that means. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It mentions that there's like, to really get the full picture, you have to go through the linear algebra. So I'm going to have to break that down on like some downtime here. I'm going to have to go through their linear algebra here to figure out what exactly they're meaning. But they're saying that it's called a quiver in the similar way as a metaphor for a quiver that you would have with like a bow and arrow, where you put your arrows into the quiver. And so they're saying in this case, they're saying that the quiver consists of directed arrows and nodes, and that the arrows are representative of quantum fields, like matter fields, that interact with the Higgs mechanism. And then the nodes represent the interactions. So, like the strong, weak, and electromagnetic interactions that are between the different fields, between the arrows. So, like, the direction of the arrows shows how the fields are charged under the various interactions. And they're, the term magnetic is metaphorical to point to what they say, the unexpected quantum properties that are made visible by these representations. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit heady, but they're saying that essentially this new paper shows that using this representation of these magnetic quivers, they can describe the Higgs mechanism, right? The Higgs boson, the interaction with the Higgs field is what gives rise to mass in our universe. And so they're saying that using this representation of magnetic quivers, that they can actually describe a lot of the Higgs mechanism in a new way that could be, more underlying fundamental physics of a way to describe what's going on here. So they say that that their magnetic fields can decay. So one type of magnetic quiver goes to another type, or it can fission, in which one magnetic quiver splits into two magnetic quivers. And they're saying that using this kind of mathematical formalism of these magnetic quivers, that can be used to explain the Higgs mechanism in a way that gives us more details about what the underlying dynamics going on are than the normal QFT kind of representations. So again, there's a lot here to digest. I'm skeptical of this approach, obviously, but if this is telling us something new about the universe, it's definitely something that warrants a deeper look. So yeah, I can only offer you the initial thoughts here. I think it's really, really interesting. Apparently, it's been generating quite a bit of buzz in the theoretical physics community. So we'll just have to sit on this one and see how it develops from here, and what kind of uses this magnetic quiver formalism can give us when it's worked on by more and more people and is developed from here. So yeah, something potentially exciting to look out for coming up on the horizon in theoretical physics there. Now, this was also, thank you for reminding me, Andrew. He was talking about vacuum decay in our local galactic neighborhood. Yes, well, that would be, universe ending, essentially. Vacuum decay would be like a phase transition that the entire universe, that a local pocket of the universe goes through a phase transition that just changes the nature of reality there. And this phase transition spreads essentially at the speed of light in a giant bubble that just like completely destroys reality as we know it and transitions it to a totally different, like kind of incomprehensible version of reality. So yes, a vacuum decay in our local neighborhood would really suck. It'd be the end of the reality as we know it. But it reminded me that the vacuum decay, these magnetic quivers can also describe kind of vacuum fluctuations in a new way of representing them. So that could be really, really exciting as well. And we have another caller here. So welcome to the show, Mr. Anderson. How's it going?
Hey, Grayson. Good. How are you?
Very good. Yeah, good to see you. This is going to be my last stream before I leave for a couple weeks to go to Wyoming.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I just hit I just hit 2,000 subscribers, but then now I'm over 2,300. So it's been a great channel growth over the last week, with like appearing on R and Raw's channel, which I will be uploading an interview, and then just having a couple videos blow up, like my debate with Frank Turek kind of blew up, and it's been awesome.
That was a good one. You did a good job on that.
Thanks, Mr. Anderson. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
Yeah, at towards the end of this stream, if there's still time, when we're done with the science news, and if there's nobody else that's calling in the show, I'm going to be actually Leo Phileas might be joining. You're welcome to join too, and we're just going to sort of go through and analyze that interaction a little bit more. It was a pretty short interaction. It wasn't like a whole hour-long debate or whatever. We should be able to get through it. Because there were a lot of points. I mean, Frank said a lot of things that I just did not have time to respond to everything in there. But
he did, yeah.
So thanks. Was there anything in specific that you wanted to call in about?
I mean, I'm open to to whatever. But and if you want to do your science news stuff instead, then that's kind of cool. But I heard that you got ghosted on a flat Earth debate that you were really kind of jonesing for here tomorrow.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, well, we can't have that right before your Wyoming trip. So my thought was, and I haven't watched enough Witsit to really ape his style, but if you wanted to have a flat Earth debate, I would be more than happy to be the flat earther for you.
Wow. Well, thank you.
And you can try and get me to admit that the Earth is round. And I can't lie, but I will be as difficult as possible.
Okay. I'm game. We can workshop this a little bit. Okay.
All right.
So here's a common observation that everyone can do to show that the Earth cannot be flat, right? On a flat Earth, the sun never sets. The sun cannot be obstructed bottom up by the horizon. So,
well, I mean, is that necessarily true? Because I mean, as I understand it, the flat Earth model suggests that as the sun gets further away, it shines down on different parts, just kind of like a flashlight over top of a map, and it's only going to be shining on like certain parts as it moves around, right?
Yeah, so you would be seeing the whole sun, though. You wouldn't be seeing the sun obstructed from the bottom up in that case. So it doesn't really help you to have this sort of spotlight sun that only shines on some places and only shines on others, because during a sunset, you witness the sun disappearing below the horizon from the bottom up. So that's what needs to be explained, not just the fact that you have some day and some night areas on Earth.
But I mean, as the sun gets further away from the observer, it's going to like go out of sight, right? Just like anything, goes out of sight when it gets further away, right?
So the difference is that when you get farther and farther away, the object gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, but it never gets obstructed from the bottom up. The way that perspective works, when things keep getting smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually you just can no longer resolve the object, and it just gets so small to where you can't see it anymore. But it never gets
right, and the sun gets to the point where you can't see it anymore either, though, right?
But the angular size of the sun in the sky doesn't shrink as it sets. It maintains the same size in the sky, but the bottom of it gets blocked, and then it keeps getting blocked from the bottom up. Perspective doesn't explain that.
Right, but what if it's just getting lower in the sky as it gets further away until it's just obscured by buildings and mountains and hills and natural variations of the landscape?
Because that would never happen in perspective. So if you think about this and you're on a street, right? And you can see the street lights as you go, and it looks like they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter as you look down the street, right? That's perspective. But the bottom of the street light, you can always see the base of that street light. No matter how small they get, you can still see the base of it. And
if it's perfectly flat.
One more point.
if it's perfectly flat.
Because
but if there's hills or anything,
I'm making one more point here. You gotta say, because you said that it could be blocked by buildings and mountains and whatever.
Sure.
But you can only ever be blocked if there's a line of sight between you and the object, and if you are taller than the object that is blocking it, basically, it will never get blocked. So like it will never get blocked by waves. If there's no buildings in the way, you're still going to see the sunset from the bottom up, and it's not just going to get smaller and smaller in the sky. You can't get around that.
What about optical illusions, though?
What illusion would explain?
Well, my understanding is that there are certain optical illusions, especially like near the water, where things can appear to be at different positions in the sky because the light is kind of bouncing in strange ways across like the waves and stuff like that.
Yeah, but that doesn't produce bottom-up obstruction, which is what needs to be explained.
Well, but you don't know that.
Well, yeah. Well, if you don't have a mechanism to explain bottom-up obstruction, you're just gesturing to, there's optical effects that can make things appear in different places, refraction, but none of that gets you to bottom-up obstruction. So I'm going to help you out here, Mr. Anderson. When Whitsitt is confronted with this situation, he will say that it's angular resolution, that your eyes lack the angular resolution to make out. And there's a difference, right? Because there's a slight difference in the angles of the distances from the top to the bottom. And he'll say that the angular resolution drops for the bottom faster than the top. And that explains the bottom-up obstruction. Here's the issue with angular resolution, right? Number one, when you observe something at the limit of its angular resolution, it looks very, very fuzzy. So what you would actually see, rather than a clean, crisp obstruction bottom up, like you can look with a solar filter at a sunset and you can see very clean, crisp, here's the black horizon, here's the sun. It's not blending between the two. If this was a limit of angular resolution, then you would see the horizon and the sun just blending into like something that you couldn't distinguish. It would not be clear. It would not be crisp. And then secondly,
but when I look at like when you see the sun,
I know I've been talking about
but you can give that point, but just before you go on to that next one, I want to talk about this one because like if you look at, I've seen like pictures, or I've even seen like, on like the water or whatever, like the bottom of the sun seems to kind of spread out, like it's like it like curves down and then it kind of spreads out as it touches the horizon as it's going down. I mean, isn't that exactly what we would expect if the issue was angular resolution rather than
you can sometimes see atmospheric effects where that happens, but if you look at it with a solar filter, like the kind of eclipse glasses that you view an eclipse with, you won't see that effect. It'll be the same shape. It will be a clear, crisp distinction. There will be no blending with the horizon. So you can just make.
So what you're saying is that you think that there are ways to mitigate the angular resolution problem, but what you're telling me is that there are optical effects then.
This has nothing to do with angular resolution. Whenever you put solar filters
then why did you bring it up?
Wait, hold on. Whenever you put solar filters on, you are not changing anything about the angular resolution of your eyes. The angular resolution is the same. So it's not affecting angular resolution at all. It's just a solar filter. Secondly, the second point I was going to say was that a camera has a different angular resolution than the eyeball. And each camera has a different angular resolution, each lens type. So what you should be able to do, if this is an effect of angular resolution and the limits of our eyes, is that when you're watching a sunset, right, you should be able to get a camera that has a higher angular resolution than your eyeball. And when you look at the sunset through that camera, you should be able to see the sun not set, not disappearing bottom up. But when you actually do that measurement, guess what you'll see? The same sunset that you're seeing with your eyes.
Well, I mean, you may say that, but we don't have a telescope or a camera or anything like that for you to test that, so we don't know now, do we?
We do, Mr. Anderson, we do.
Well, not right now. We don't, because we're not watching the sunset. All we
The
can
sun
do.
is already set where I'm at. I can't do this observation right now, but I assure you, on any given day, when the sun sets, like it does every day, you can go out there with a camera and you can test this for yourself.
Well, I mean, look, that may be, and maybe there are problems with our model in terms of explaining where the sun goes at nighttime, but that doesn't. None of that means the Earth is round. The Earth could still be flat, and there could still be.
You're not playing the part of a good flat earther, Mr. Anderson, because they claim that they have no model. There is no model of flat Earth. That's how they get around that one. Oh, you think you found a flaw in my model? Guess what? I had no model.
Well, I don't know, but I mean, I think that I mean, maybe I'm playing a bad flat earther, but
here's what a true flat earther would say, Mr. Anderson. If you've become
is this better?
Advocate,
Ooh, I'm getting shade now on my portrayal of flat earthers.
Why don't you read this?
Failing to consider the non-Euclidean nature of light propagation above the dome of the firmament.
There you go. I forgot I forgot to consider the non-Euclidean geometries of the dome. This is literally what they'll say, is that because the firmament, the dome surrounding the flat Earth, is some sort of special magic material that doesn't have properties like any other material that we know about, that it can somehow, through coffee cup caustics or whatever, it can bend light in mysterious ways, and it can just explain anything. Anything that you need to explain, you just say, well, look, the dome is some crazy new material that we can't say. And actually, I think we have a true flat earther in the live chat here. So I don't know if he's got the balls to actually join the stream. The link is in the live chat if you want to join Observing God.
I'll stay on his side. I'll help him out.
Here, you can read his comments for the flat earth position here.
All right. Things above eye level appear to drop down until we can no longer resolve it. Same goes for things below eye level, but they rise. I don't know what that means.
I actually also don't know what that means. This is kind of incoherent, and this is how you know it's a true flat earther.
Well, but what I'm telling you is that you shouldn't be looking at the sky to figure out the shape of the Earth in any event.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's why, luckily, you can make other kinds of measurements of the actual shape of the Earth without any reference to the sky. Like, whenever you have any kind of engineering, that needs to be perfectly straight. So not level, because level conforms with the curvature of the Earth. You need it straight. Well, that says the Merriam-Webster's definition of the word level. Actually, we could pull up that definition. But when you need something perfectly straight, level is not good enough, because you need to account for Earth's curvature. And luckily for us, LIGO and the experiment LIGO, the laser interferometer gravitational wave detector, has done this. It needed to be perfectly straight, and they ended up having to account for Earth's curvature in the actual construction of LIGO. That is an actual measurement that a physical apparatus had to account for Earth curve, because it needed to be straight. So the Earth cannot be flat.
That's, you know what, scientists will tell you that because they're trying to hide the truth from you. Well, have you built a LIGO in your backyard? Can you show me a LIGO detector that, you know, that we can like look at together, that I can make myself? Or do I have to trust the scientists when they tell me myself? Right. Well, do I have to trust you and trust the scientists when they tell me that LIGO is doing what you say it does?
Every Saturday once a month, I think it's the first or second Saturday of the month, LIGO opens its doors and to the public, and you can go to LIGO and you actually get to go into the control room while it's running, and you get to see it working in real time. And LIGO
but I'm not going to see it measuring the curvature of the Earth now, am I? Because it's not measuring the curvature of the Earth, because it's a straight line. And they're going to tell you that it's not, that they had to account for that, but you don't know for sure whether they did.
Luckily, LIGO has published their actual engineering documents about the building of LIGO and how they had to
and so then they just put lies in that. It's easy. You understand there's a global conspiracy to hide the truth of the flat Earth, right?
So here, let's talk about something that could not possibly be faked, right? Something that like they could
Thank
not
you.
actually be lying about.
Yes,
Something
that
that
would be
could not be
wonderful.
lied about, right? Flight times, right? You know that flight times
Flight
are not
times.
lies because you can test it yourself. You can take any of these flights. You can see the plane take off. You can have a friend at the receiving airport, and you can see it land. See that it is the time that they said. If you look at flight routes, you can actually rule out the possibility that the Earth is flat because you can derive distances from flight times. There is a formula for this. And there's two formulas. One way would be to do it on a flat Earth, and one way would be to do it on an Earth that has any amount of curvature. There's going to be two different formulas. And when you plug in the numbers into flat Earth, they don't work out at all. Like the actual distances are completely broken. But when you plug it into the formula from flight times to distance using an Earth that is curved, you get the correct distance calculations. And this can all be verified. This data cannot be faked because anybody can verify it for themselves.
Well, there's two things that I would say about that. The first one is that is assuming a constant airspeed and a constant corresponding land speed, neither of which necessarily are the case, right? Because there could be currents that are going, much faster near the ice wall that are speeding up planes in the southern hemisphere. But you know what? There aren't really any flights in the southern hemisphere anyways. Most of them are in the northern hemisphere. And
you can do a flight yourself in the southern hemisphere between like South Africa and Australia.
Well, I've never flown from South Africa to Australia. So you say that they're available.
You're a lawyer. You have disposable income.
Well, I don't have the burning desire to try and verify your, crackpot sphere Earth, ball Earth theory.
Okay, well, whenever you get motivated to actually test your ideologies, why don't you go?
Well, I'm not testing my ideology. In that situation, I would be testing your ideology and getting on a rigged flight where they try and trick me into believing that the Earth is round.
Well, here, you can look at the ground yourself. You could see what route.
How am I going to look at the ground when I'm flying over the ocean? They could be flying me around in circles.
You could bring a compass.
Australia could be a myth.
Well, you could fly to Australia. Try telling Mark Reed Australia is a myth.
Well, I'm not even sure that Mark Reed is real. He might be a robot.
Okay. Well, Mr. Anderson, thank you so much for calling in. You are my favorite flat earther ever.
Am I bad flat earther? I don't know.
No, you're a great flat earther. I think we all love you. I've got another caller here waiting in the wings.
By all
I'm
means.
going to let you go for now. But Mr. Anderson, I appreciate you for calling in and coming out as a flat earther. It was a total shock. No one expected it.
Oh, now you're just throwing shade.
And with that, Mr. Anderson, thanks for joining.
Good night.
All right. So we've got another caller here waiting in the wings. Let me make sure that he's ready to join. Here he is. Aaron, welcome to the show. Aaron, how's it going?
Oh, doing well.
I believe you were also a caller into that Frank Turek show, correct?
Yeah, I was the second caller on there.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you probably saw my interaction with it. You've come across my channel. Is there anything in specific that you wanted to call in about today?
So I was curious if you have any ideas about like the Big Bang or what happened before the universe. I'm really curious though. What did you think about your interaction with Frank Turek?
Okay, so yes, I do have lots of ideas about the Big Bang. I'm really a big fan of cosmology, so we could definitely talk about all that.
Awesome.
In terms of my interaction with Frank Turek, I wish that there were a couple more points that I had made a little bit better, like articulated better. But overall, I was pretty happy with I asked him a very open-ended question, basically just, why is God necessary? What does it give us in terms of our explanation for reality that we would be missing otherwise? And it was kind of fun just seeing Frank Turek just run the gambit. He just kept bringing up, well, what about this? And I shot it down. What about this?
Mhm.
I shot it down. He tries to change the subject entirely and say, okay, what if just Christianity is true? Would you be a believer then? And it's like,
Mhm.
well, yeah. I mean, if you're presupposing it's true to start with, of course. So like he just kept like retreating. Every time he brought up a point, he would just retreat to another point. And then finally at the very end, he said, okay, well, none of this was even my best argument. I really wanted to talk about Aquinas' fifth way, but we ran out of time. Oh, well. So that was
As if he wasn't in control over the whole time. Yeah.
Yes, that was my basic overall impression of the debate. Spoilers for if Leo joins later and we do the analysis. That was my general impression of it. What did you think?
So I thought your points were great about we only have the one sample size when you were mentioning that.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed specifically about Frank Turek, but I'm sure more people do this, is it's like they don't allow those arguments to even enter the picture. Like they've built this whole argument around, around the design element of it. And so for you to even enter this idea of, oh, well, what if this has happened, infinite amount of times elsewhere and we're not aware of it, and this is the universe we have. They don't really allow that to come into the fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's the issue with the multiverse and just the issue with the sample size, right? And I thought it was really funny and ironic because earlier, I don't remember who he was in the call with. I don't think it was you, but maybe it might have been, where they were talking about, well, what about other possible universes, like other ways that God could have made the universe in which he created people that had free will, but freely chose not to commit evil. And Frank just said, well, maybe there's other possibilities for how God could do it, but we got the universe that we got, so we can't really think about these other possibilities. I'm like, dude, that's your whole fine-tuning argument. You're literally like,
exactly, yeah.
I mean, he literally just shut down his own fine-tuning argument with that line of reasoning, and he didn't seem to get that, even when I brought up, like, hey, wait a minute, you already defeated this argument yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he said that there would be no need to come up with a multiverse if there was no fine-tuning problem. But like, no, that's not true. And like, I wish I had expanded on that more, but like, you can introduce a multiverse by just asking the question, hey, like, if the Big Bang happened once here in our universe, what would stop the Big Bang from happening multiple times elsewhere? Like, and that introduces the universe. It has nothing to do with fine-tuning. Every single universe could have the exact same conditions. It doesn't address fine-tuning at all. I mean, there's like metaphysical ways to introduce the multiverse without any reference to fine-tuning. It's not necessary for a multiverse.
If I remember correctly, he was asserting that the multiverse is nothing more than an excuse for the beginning.
Yeah, basically. And he said it only pushes the problem elsewhere. And then he misused the Borg-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, said that it shows that the universe had to have a beginning, when in reality all it shows is that inflation had to have a beginning, which is not the same thing. And he was completely conflating it and like essentially misconstruing the meaning of the theorem. So yeah, I mean, he misunderstood science. He contradicted his own arguments with his other arguments. So it was kind of a mess all over for Frank. I thought Frank actually did like really poorly, especially with not just with my interaction, but with like Leo Filius's interaction at the end with the problem of evil. Like it was showing like he didn't even understand things like internal critiques. Like he seemed confused about how internal criticisms worked. It was just really shocking to see some of like the depths of his like lack of understanding on some of these concepts.
Well, he has a model that he talks within, and people try and veer out of that or bring arguments in, and he shuts that down. Like he wants his argument the way it is in his book, and he's got this stuff memorized. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was actually helpful for me. I had planned on talking about atheism being the lack of belief. And I was actually getting nervous beforehand. I wasn't sure if I was going to call in. So I listened to some of Stealing from God to get me pumped up. Like, yeah, I want to talk to this guy,
Yeah.
But I mean, he said exactly what he says in his book. And so I knew exactly what to say back to him, even though he really takes control of the conversation. He steers it the way he wants it to
Yeah.
steer it.
I also thought it was
Mhm.
interesting how Cameron would come in and kind of rescue him whenever he thought that
Yeah.
the conversation wasn't going the way that he wanted. Cameron would come in and say, "Oh, well, like what about this, or what about that, or I think what Frank means is this," or like he would try to save Frank from coming across too poorly. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was,
because we know how much Cam was doing in the background. Like
yeah,
he was staying busy getting all this stuff organized. So yeah, every now
yes.
and then he'd pop in and be like, guys,
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, but it was a good conversation. I'm pretty sure everybody listening right now has probably already seen my video on it, but check out if you want to see Aaron's interaction. I don't know if it's on your channel or something, but the original videos on capturing Christianity. If you want to see Aaron's interaction as well, and Leo Phileas's interaction is on his channel. So if you don't want to give capturing Christianity the view. But yeah, it was a fun conversation. Did you want to ask anything about like the Big Bang or something before we move on?
Yeah. Oh, and I am working on a channel. So me and my brother, we do a podcast together. So I'm an atheist. He's a Christian,
Interesting.
and whenever I was deconstructing, I would constantly listen to a lot of Christian stuff and a lot of atheist stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of exhausting to go back and forth between the two. So the whole idea of the podcast is for people that are really just trying to get their stuff together. They can go to one place and get the argument from both sides. It's called Out of the Echo, and it's on Spotify, and I'm getting it on YouTube.
Cool.
But but yeah. So what I was calling in about is the beginning of the universe. For the longest time, I just wasn't concerned about it. I'm a computer guy, so you give me a computer, and I can look through the logs in the computer and tell you pretty much everything that's happened ever since the OS was installed. But before that, using the computer, I can't really tell you anything. That's kind of been my outlook on the universe. Like within the universe, there's only so much we can tell you about the universe.
Mm-hmm.
But recently, I've started being convinced of the big bounce. The idea of matter and antimatter. They expand out and
Yep.
then at some point come together and back out. So is that even considered a multiverse? Because I feel like the universe and the matter is always there. It just basically reforms.
Yeah, I don't think that that's considered part of a multiverse. But yeah, the Big Bounce kind of has. It was written off with the discovery of dark energy, and that dark energy was seen as just would continue to propel the expansion of the universe to accelerate faster and faster forever, basically.
Mm.
But with recent discoveries, like I'm talking about recent as in like April,
Wow.
there seemed to be some evidence that was suggesting that actually dark energy could be getting more weak. And so if dark energy is getting weaker over time, that means that the energy that is accelerating the expansion of the universe is getting weaker and weaker. So the accelerated expansion will slow down. And eventually that expansion, because of the matter content of the universe, will start going the other way if dark energy continues to weaken like it seems like it might be doing. So we need a little bit more years of data collection to confirm that dark energy is getting weaker. But if that is the case, then the big bounce kind of enters back into the picture, because that would show that eventually the universe will start to contract back in on itself. And then you could have this kind of big bounce dynamic. So the theory is kind of, it's not completely dead by any means.
It's up in the air right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
The way I imagined it is like a small lake. How when it's not interacted with for long enough, it'll get that kind of glassy stillness to it. And so what I would imagine is like after the universe has expanded, there's heat death, and basically all the matter can just get to an even kill of steadiness. And then there's that little something that combines some matter together, and then all of it comes back together in one. That's
So
kind of what I was imagining.
There's kind of an interesting horseshoe dynamic going on with entropy at that stage. Like when you talk about the earliest stages of the universe, that's the very lowest entropy states of the universe that we would know about. And the properties of that would be like extremely homogeneous in every direction. There's like sort of there's not that many different microstates that would affect the overall macro state of the universe. And interestingly, when you get to a state of maximum entropy, you start seeing a lot of those characteristics again. At maximum entropy, at the heat death of the universe, you have the same homogeneity in every direction again. You have not that many different, so basically you start seeing the same kind of, it starts being kind of like you have to almost start the clock over again. Like the entropy kind of goes back to zero. So there's an interesting sort of horseshoe dynamic that is like a lot of theoretical physicists might point to, but understanding entropy on like a quantum scale is still rather difficult. So like getting to characterize it in the very earliest stages of the universe and comparing that to how it would be at heat death is still kind of a field that needs more development in order to say either way. So yeah. It's the same with anything that happened before the Big Bang, like with our descriptions of physics breaking down as we get closer and closer to the earliest parts of the universe, you just aren't able to say what's going on. You're not able to offer a physical description that could accurately convey what is happening at those early stages because we don't have the physics to actually say, to characterize it mathematically. There are, however, certain proposed experiments, like empirical ways of gaining information about if there were any previous universes that could have affected our universe, like part of this multiverse. There are ways that those previous universes could have impacts on measurable quantities in our universe, namely the gravitational wave background. So that's like this background of the universe that's kind of like a hum of gravitational waves, which are these ripples in the fabric of space and time. And if our devices can get more and more precise at measuring this gravitational wave background, which is still like in its infancy, basically, like we just confirmed the existence of the gravitational wave background this year. So it's very much in its infancy. But if the devices get more and more sophisticated at measuring it, then there's like maybe like a 30% chance or something that we could detect the signals from previous or other universes, which would kind of confirm the multiverse in some ways. So that is possible that we could do that.
This just sounds like a Spider-Man movie, the way you're describing.
Well, we don't know anything about. Maybe it would tell us about the properties of those other universes, but maybe not. I don't know. I'm not going to say if it's a Spider-Man type situation or not, but there are some certain empirical and theoretical avenues that we could go down that could make progress in understanding the multiverse. It could be at least not totally inaccessible to us, like epistemologically.
And I feel like I'm still a recovering Christian in some ways, because I was like a young Earth creationist.
Oh wow!
Like,
okay.
Yeah. No, I was
until like how long ago?
4 years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm still. I went into a deep dive in evolution because for most of my life it was just a hoax or whatever the Christians want to call it.
Yeah.
So in some ways I almost relate to the flat earther that was on here. Like it's hard whenever your mindset is so deep into something, you're buried your head into the sand. You don't want to hear criticism of your belief and all that.
Yeah.
So that was me for the longest time. But I guess whenever you're talking about this, my thought is, well, how much of this is actually tangible?
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time,
I was going to ask what brought you out of that mindset.
Oh, well, so for me, what started my conversion was my daughter was diagnosed with special needs, and I just couldn't imagine a good God making someone born that way. That started the process, but then from there, it was a deconstruction of everything. So that brought me into a time period of hating God. Then God and I, we got on better terms, but still, I just found the evidence for the Bible just to be lackluster.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for calling in, Aaron. I appreciate your calling. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on before I let you go here?
I was just curious, like the tangibility of what you were talking about. Like, so some things that you were mentioning is seems very theoretical, and then you've also talked about experiments that were done. So I guess I'm not sure how to put that in words, but because I know whenever I was finally starting to accept evolution, uh, people would say things like, "Well, at the beginning of the universe, there was just hydrogen and all these elements." And I was just listening to them like, "How the f can they know this?"
Yeah.
So. Mhm.
So yeah, there's multiple different ways to know that. Like you're hitting on it correctly. There's like a theoretical approach, and then there's also like empirical observations or measurements or experiments. Um, so yeah, there's a mix of these things. Like originally, you would have the math that would make the prediction that our early universe, like at the time of recombination, where you had a universe that was too small and densely packed for even atoms to exist. What you have, it's full of plasma, which is like the nuclei and the electrons of plasma, but they're not joined together into atoms. And so when the universe keeps expanding, you can calculate at what point that it would get the energy density would get low enough to where atoms could form out of that plasma. So you could calculate at what point that should happen. And our calculations show that it's around 380,000 years after that Big Bang moment. And you can make predictions. Well, if this happened, then we should observe radiation in the sky, because when these subatomic particles come together and form atoms, they emit radiation. And that radiation should be redshifted by the subsequent expansion. So you make that prediction. And like from the theoretical framework, now you have an empirically verifiable prediction that you can test. And that's what was done with the cosmic microwave background. We saw that radiation in the sky from that formation of the first atoms. There's no other physically viable explanation for what could be causing that radiation that we observe in the sky. It's coming from literally every direction that we look in the sky. And it's redshifted all the way to the microwave end of the spectrum. So that is a verified prediction of the formation of the first atoms. And you can see in the actual calculations that the energy required for the formation of hydrogen and helium is like the path of least resistance. Things typically follow the more energetically favorable reactions. And so you can calculate, well, here's based on the energetics of it and the kinematics and how this plasma would be forming atoms, it will produce this much hydrogen, this much helium, this much lithium, and it's not going to be producing much of the heavy elements because it would just be so statistically improbable and energetically unfavorable for those heavier elements to be forming from that mechanism. And then you can now have a testable observation. You could say, well, look, in the very, very farthest away stars that we can observe, right? Those should be the very earliest stars in the universe that we can observe, are the farthest ones that we can see. So you make the prediction that they should be composed of many more lighter elements than heavier elements. Like when we look at stars today, there's a lot of heavy elements in stars. And you can tell this through spectroscopy by the kind of light they emit. You can tell what kind of elements are composing them. So when you look at the very farthest stars, you actually do see, like the James Webb Space Telescope has seen, that they have much more hydrogen and helium content and much less amounts of the heavier elements. So there's a predicted the very first generation of star has no heavy elements. It's just straight out from that Big Bang material. It's just a bunch of hydrogen and helium. It's called a population 3 star. That is a prediction that comes out of the theoretical framework, but the prediction is testable empirically. And so far, we have not seen any population 3 stars. The very farthest stars that we see are really, really low on the heavy elements. They have a lot more hydrogen and helium, but they still have some heavy elements. So far, we haven't seen population 3 stars. But over the course of James Webb, it's very possible that we will see population 3 stars, and that would be a verification that we were on the right track with that theoretical model that made that prediction. So that's just kind of how we would progress scientific knowledge, using a combination of the theory and the empirical.
I love it. And I look back at the times whenever I would just think, oh, scientists, they clearly don't understand. They need to be listening to Ken Ham because he's got it all figured out. But yeah, the arrogance of thinking that people that are doing the work in the lab and they're writing their papers and getting it critiqued, and then you got this pastor on a pulpit who has they're not answering to anyone, and but no, they got it right. You know,
Yeah.
the arrogance of that thinking.
People really like to have concrete answers. They don't like unknowns. Like people are psychologically averse to, they want a nice answer that comforts them, that they feel like they have an answer, like they know something about the universe. They don't want to just sit with the fact that there are unknowns and maybe unknowable aspects of the universe. So that freaks out a lot of people and they don't like it. And they say, well, look, the one guy's telling me answers and the other guy is saying that we don't know yet. So I'm just going to go with the guy that's giving me answers because I like simple answers. It makes me feel like I've learned something and I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to worry in existential angst about anything. So I think it's a psychological kind of thing. But
yeah, that makes perfect sense. And like also I got this book and it has all the truth and exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. But hey man, thanks so much for having me on here. This was great.
Yeah. So I do this every week. I'm gonna be taking a break for a couple weeks to go on this Wyoming trip, but then I'll be back and I'll be doing weekly streams again. So thanks for calling in. I hope you tune in subsequent weeks.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Thanks for calling in, Aaron. Cool. So having some pretty good call-ins yet. So far, we haven't got any real flat earthers or young earth creationists or, pseudo-science peddlers of various kinds. So if you're out there, if you're listening, the link to join is pinned in the live chat. But for now, we can get back to some of the science news. So let's see. Caden said that he asked, have you heard of a quasi black hole star which may potentially be responsible for the formation of supermassive black holes? Yeah, I mean, I've heard of the idea of like black hole stars. I don't really know how it can be manifested into an empirically testable observation because it just kind of seems like, I've heard people talk about dark matter stars and how those could appear just like black holes. But if they're both predicting the exact same empirical observations, then you can't really how do you pick from one theoretical framework to the other if they're making the same observation, like testable predictions? So I think it's kind of at that stage right now. That's what I would say. But it certainly is an interesting avenue to look down if that's truly the case. Hopefully they can come up with an actual prediction that could be empirical, that could definitively point towards one model or the other. But yeah, there definitely needs to be some kind of physical explanation for how we can have such massive black holes so early on in the universe's history. We covered it a couple weeks ago about James Webb seeing the very earliest really massive black holes in the early universe. So yes, definitely needs to be an avenue. And also just how galaxies can form so fast, so early on. And it does kind of seem like black holes and dark matter play a really, really key role in the dynamics of those early galaxy formations. So let's move on to more science news. As I was saying before we took a couple of those calls, this was a really, really big news week in space news. Specifically, we had a bunch of really cool space missions. So the Chang'e mission to the moon. This was a Chinese mission that sent a rover to the moon and collected a lunar sample from the far side of the moon. So to my knowledge, this is the first moon sample that is being brought back to Earth from the actual far side of the moon. So it would be really cool to see if there's any kind of like differences in composition from the far side to the near side. And yeah, looking forward to that. It'll be a couple months and it's China. So I don't know exactly how they'll do the disclosures and the publications, but hopefully we'll have that information for that far side sample soon. I think that some people are predicting more water ice in that sample. So it'll be really cool to see what kind of compositional differences that you can get there. But that was only like one of three big news updates in terms of space technology. So we had a bit of a space race this week between Boeing and SpaceX. Now, I think I speak for probably everybody in this chat that I'm not a big fan of either Boeing or Elon Musk, but it was a cool week for the actual technology anyway, because they're both sort of competing for the contracts with NASA for the Artemis missions to sort of, be able to have their technology take us to the moon and to the International Space Station, etc. So the Boeing mission had been delayed for a while, but they got their Starliner to work. It actually worked. It launched and it went up and docked with the International Space Station. Now, this was not without hiccups. There were hiccups. It was not all smooth sailing. There was like a helium leak in inside their Starliner, so that's kind of a big issue. And there was sort of a little bit of some hiccups with docking with the International Space Station. And yeah, I'm kind of right there with Carlos there. I'd be a little bit concerned with flying in a Boeing, given all of the craziness that's been going on with Boeing lately. So yeah, and then on the other side, Elon Musk's SpaceX had a launch this week. So they've been trying to get this technology for reusable rockets. So the booster is reusable and the actual Starship is reusable. So they've been trying to get this technology. They've had launches before where the thing just burned up upon re-entry in the atmosphere and it was a total failure a couple months ago. They were back at it this week for another shot. And this time they were met with a lot more success. Like the booster disconnected and the booster came back down and actually landed. It was the end goal is for it to land upright at a tower where it can then be reused. And in this practice run, it didn't land at a tower or anything. It landed in the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico, but it was testing and it did actually control its flight back to be actually like hovering a little bit upright in position, like right above the surface of the water before it fell back down. So the booster technology worked. It'll be just a matter of, precisely controlling where it lands so that it can land at that tower and not destroy the tower in the process. That's going to be difficult. And the Starship itself also re-entered the atmosphere. The last time, basically, it only has heat shields on one side of it. So it's kind of falling like a belly flop. And the last time it kind of rolled a bit and then all of the atmosphere just destroyed the thing. So this time it managed to stay in that belly flop position. The heat shield took a lot of damage. Like there were chunks of this thing missing by the time it came back down, but it did eventually go through the belly flop. And then right at the last second, the rockets then reoriented to be upright. And then it also hovered right above the surface of the ocean before dropping back down. And so, yeah, really cool display of this technology showing that, hey, like this is the first time that people have attempted a reusable rocket launch. And this was the most success that they've had so far. So, and they also streamed the whole thing live on Twitter. And they actually maintained like streaming through like re-entry. Like there were a couple moments where they lost contact with the streaming, but like nobody's ever streamed re-entry. You normally don't get actual like video of re-entry because there's just like there's literally plasma engulfing the entire ship. But like some of the footage from this, like they had a drone shot for the launch. If I had my game together, I would probably have found those clips for you. But yeah, seek them out for yourself. Watch some of the clips. Really, really cool stuff. You can actually see like the plasma engulfing the heat shields as this thing is entering the atmosphere. Some really, really cool shots from that launch. So that was a lot of news for space launches this week. So let's go back now and let's cover some of the science news back from more of biology and earth science here. So this one was a fun one. We've talked about some recent paleontological discoveries of some ancient animal species, but how about a new genus of ant species on Earth today? And it's very, very pretty. I think that you guys will like this one. So it's an entomological discovery of a new genus of ant. So genus as in there's multiple species, and you can see right here, this thing is like metallically blue. Really, really cool looking ant species. Like, I mean, oh, hold on. You can see here, I mean, this is like really, really cool coloration. It looks kind of like structural color. I didn't get to see if this was from a pigment, but it looks to me like a structural color. So not like pigmentation. Really, really cool ant species. And this was found in the kind of Indo-Malaysian, Indo-Malayan region. So this was in Arunachal Pradesh in northeastern India, which is on my bucket list. It's a place that I'd really like to visit one day. One of the rainiest places on earth is just south of there, Meghalaya. And yeah, very, very cool coloration on this newly discovered ant species. So the entomologists definitely celebrating that one. A cool win for them this week. So yeah, new ant species just dropped. Who dis? Now, I don't just focus on the science news. I also do some news from archaeology and history. And we've got some news from there this week. One, our understanding, and again, DNA coming back in to play a role. These ancient DNA studies can really, really change a lot of our understanding from history. And a new ancient DNA study, not in humans, but in horses this week, showed us that actually the domestication of horses occurred later than we had thought by a couple hundred years. So that's kind of rewriting our understanding of the domestication of horses a little bit coming from ancient DNA. Obviously, probably we'll need more samples, but these DNA samples from ancient horses are kind of changing our conception of when they were originally domesticated. It's not 4,000 BC or whatever in Kazakhstan, which I believe was the consensus before then. It's a little bit later with the Yamnaya, who are sort of the ancestors of a lot of modern day Europeans, like the R1b haplogroups. So there was also a new archaeological discovery that I thought was really interesting, and it also enabled from ancient DNA playing really important roles in shaping understanding of the human past. This from much more recently. This is from the Iron Age, and it's from a sort of Celtic cultural tribe, a little bit bigger than a tribe because they did have a lot of economic wealth and political influence, called the Hallstatt culture. The Hallstatt culture is really, really cool. They were located kind of in Central Europe, north of the Alps, kind of in modern day kind of Germany region. And they gained a lot of riches through their access to the Baltic trade routes for amber. So the Baltics would be north of this location. They would get a lot of amber from the Baltics, and they would distribute that amber throughout the ancient Bronze and Iron Age trade routes. So you can actually see this Baltic amber. Like, there are Egyptian pharaohs, like King Tut had an amulet that had amber from the Baltics, like in Northern Europe. And so this trade was facilitated by the Hallstatt culture. And so this new study, this ancient DNA study, was showing us that, oh, hold on, I thought I had it pulled up, and apparently it's asking me to verify my humanity. Hold on. Okay, here we go. So this was by looking at graves of these elites in this. They would be buried in these big mounds here as their tombs, and they do have recreation of what the tombs look like for the elites of the Hallstatt culture in the Iron Age. You can see here the body here laid out with this big wagon and these different horns and different riches and grave goods. And so this was a patriarchal culture in some respects, in that the leader, these elites at these burials, were men. But what they figured out is that the actual, how it had been a mystery for a while for how the leaders of this Hallstatt culture were selected and how the succession worked. And what they learned was that actually the leaders were not going from father to son like a patrilineal line of succession. It was more of a matrilineal line of succession, where it doesn't really matter who your father is so much, it matters who your mother is. So it seems like the line of succession would go not from the leader to the leader's son, it went from the leader to the leader's sister's son. So it matters who, who your niece or who your nephew is, basically. Like the elite women in the society, it was their offspring, their sons, who would go on to become the leaders of the next generation, not necessarily the children of the leader themselves. So seeing, matrilineal lines of succession is pretty common in a lot of like hunter-gatherers and a lot of like really early civilizations. You can see some sort of matrilineal successions there. But it's a little bit more rare to see it all the way into the Iron Age. So really, really cool discovery. This was done through ancient DNA. So they were taking the DNA of these elites to figure out the familial relationships there. And they kind of figured out, it's not patrilineal, it's matrilineal. It matters who's your mother. Exactly as Earl's saying here, who's your mama? So yeah, pretty cool new study from there for archaeology and history news. There was a lot of science news this week, guys. There was a lot to cover here. So, but we've only got, I think right here, we've only got one more big story for the week to cover. And this was a cool one. I mean, I'm saving one of the coolest ones for last here, because this kind of goes into something that I brought up actually in my flat earth debate last night, which I will be uploading that video here in the next few days so you can watch it on this channel. But it's about zircon crystals, specifically what they tell us about the origins of the hydrologic cycle, as in like the water cycle that we all learned about like in elementary school, how water is cycled through the planet. Well, scientists were able to date the origin of the hydrological cycle, the water cycle, back to 4 billion years ago, which is like significantly earlier than previous estimates. And yeah, I just want to say you're welcome for bringing the science news. Thank you guys for appreciating it. I'm a big science nerd. I love science news. This gives me an excuse to keep up with it and share it with like-minded people. So yes, I have found some like-minded people here. Pragmatic Crystal, Andrew pointing out zircons are a geologist's best friends. I freaking love zircon crystals, man. I can nerd out about some zircons, and we're going to do that today. But yes, I love being able to share the science news with all of you guys. And yes, I haven't seen so many people spamming based or cringe in chat, but just so you guys are aware, the memberships are available, and you do get some custom emojis with those memberships. So yeah, let's see. We also have Metal Eddie here, who said, before your channel blows up and gets famous, I just wanted to say, hey, I'm a preacher's son who deconverted in 2009. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Metal Eddie. And yeah, it'd be really cool. I mean, the channel kind of is blowing up. I mean, I just hit 2,000 subscribers. I'm already at 2,300. Yes, and I Killed Earl has some of those emojis. Admire them. I like the Jesus face palm myself. I think it's pretty good. So yeah, hopefully you guys can have fun playing around with some of those. I want to see more of those emojis here. Specifically when I do live debates, I want to see people with the face palming Jesus. I want to see people spamming based and cringe points. And yeah, but first of all, I want to get back onto this article about zircon crystals here to round out the science news, because this was a really cool study, guys. This was awesome. Just thinking about, basically they were using, instead of looking at the uranium and lead isotopes in zircon crystals, which are normally done for like dating for like the age of the Earth overall, they're like the oldest way to date the Earth, basically. They were looking at oxygen isotopes and actually reasoning, because we know how the water cycle affects the ratio of oxygen isotopes. So the start of the water cycle would actually have affected these ratios, and it would reflect in the oxygen isotope content in zircon crystals. And that's exactly what they looked at here in this study, and found that the fresh water, this water cycle began a lot earlier than expected. Only like, the Earth is roughly like 4.5 billion years old. This is just 500 million years into the Earth. We're already getting the water cycle kick-started. So this is a lot earlier than previously thought. And yes, Andrew's pointing out correctly. So these were done with zircons from Jack Hills in Australia, and that material is the oldest Earth-based material ever found. These will give the oldest radiometric dates of any material on Earth, but they give a similar radiometric date as the material found in outside of Earth in like asteroids, meteorites, that kind of thing. You can date that material, and you can get dates that are around that 4.54, 4.56 billion year old range. That is how old the Earth is, because it's how old the whole solar system is. So you can date other things in the solar system. And just by some crazy coincidence, I don't know why, I mean, it all points to the same date for the origin of the universe, or of the solar system, rather. And so they all converge. You're not finding 7 billion year old material out there. You're not finding 6 billion. It all comes around 4.5 billion years old. So, yeah, from multiple different methods, multiple different samples. And yeah, the dates are consistent with one another exactly. So, yes, very cool to like have a little bit of a deeper understanding about the chronology of how the Earth formed, how the Earth today as we know it was realized, and the start of like the water cycle is a big one in terms of that. So very, very cool. That is the news that I wanted to cover for the new science that happened this week. So with that, we have another caller here that's waiting behind. He's no stranger to the channel, so I want to welcome Caden to the stream. Caden, I want to test your microphone. Sometimes there's a little bit of audio issues. Make sure that you're coming across okay.
Hello.
Hey, Caden, good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Was there anything specifically that you wanted to call in to discuss?
Well, first I would like to address those who don't know who I am in the audience. My name is Caden Slinker. About 2 weeks ago I had graduated high school.
Congratulations.
I am autistic. I am LDS, and I have my own YouTube channel, which I really hope to start producing more educational videos for in the future. So please go sub to that. It is the same name as you'll see me in the regular chat in the stream.
Cool.
Anyways, I saw you were talking with Aaron, I think, earlier. So, and you were discussing your conversation you had with, I can't remember who his name was.
Frank Turek.
Frank Turek. So you were mentioning how he was having trouble answering the questions that you were asking him.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to give my answers. I'm sorry if they're not good ones. These are just the best ones I can come up with.
Okay.
The first question was I think, why do we need a god?
Yeah, so the question that I asked Frank Turek was essentially echoing a quote that's attributed to Laplace, who was like a mathematician, a polymath back in the day. And I think it was Napoleon who asked him, do you believe in God? And his answer was, I have no need for that hypothesis. So what I asked Frank Turek is, why is there a need for God in order to explain the reality around us? Because I look at reality and I don't see any need for a God to explain the universe.
Okay, so here's my best explanation. Obviously, if you look at the universe, obviously it shows no clear sign that there's a God in any form, correct?
I would say so, yeah.
So the best way to describe it is that obviously we're using methodological naturalism, I'm presuming here, correct?
That is how science works, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like if you're trying to do science, it's probably best to assume that what is the natural is all there is. That said, I do believe that a god does exist and in some shape, way, or form was responsible for at least starting the natural processes that we can observe.
Okay, but is there a need for you to believe that? Is there a necessity for that? Like that's the
Um,
question I was asking.
uh, this, if anything, the honest, I think the only, to me, it's a to some extent a necessity because it brings to, at least for me, it may not be for you. Because like, there are plenty of people who do not believe in God or any religion. Period. So I can't speak for them.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't know how that really progresses the conversation because you're just saying that it might not be necessary for me, but you think it necessary. But you said it brings something. Like, what is it bringing?
It okay. Look, I am terrible. Like I said, I am terrible at giving good explanations. I have. It's not my. Okay, I do not believe in the idea of a god of the gaps. There is a god. He is our heavenly Father. He and whether or not you believe in him is not something that I'm not going to force you to believe in him.
Well, I'm
I'm
not
not gonna,
asking you. I'm not. I don't think you're trying to force me. I'm just asking, like, why should I believe? I mean, that's not forcing me. That's giving me a reason. All I'm asking is there a reason why I should believe? Does it give me anything? Does it explain something that I couldn't explain
it,
otherwise?
I guess the best way is it gives us a reason for why we're here. Cuz like we can kind of definitively prove how we got here, but it's like as far as we're sure it, we have no purpose. We just came into existence through probabilistic mechanisms for no
Yeah.
apparent person.
Okay. I think that my issue with that is that you're kind of just like pushing that question elsewhere. So now, okay, all of a sudden, now we have a reason why we're here because God created us. But then you can just ask, why does God exist? Why is God here? And you still have that same uncertainty, except now it's not just for our existence, it's for God's existence.
God's existence, God exists. The reason he exists is because he, at one point, was like us.
Is this like an LDS thing? Because it doesn't seem like a biblical thing.
Yes, this is LDS. I think I mentioned that I was LDS.
Yes, yes. Well, yeah. So again, if the idea, as I understand it, is that you kind of, if you are a good enough member of the LDS, if you know are, if you fulfill enough of these criteria, then eventually when you die, then you kind of get your own universe where you get to be kind of like a god there.
Yes. Also, it seems like everyone in the chat does not like me now.
No, I don't think that they're doing anything personal like to you. That I mean, I think that they're able to differentiate. Like maybe they don't like the LDS church, but I don't think that they're holding it to you personally. I don't think anybody doesn't like you as a person. So
I used a middle finger emoji in the chat, and I think that was pointing at me.
um, I don't see the middle finger emoji, but I killed Earl. Don't don't be rude. I know her. She's not rude. She's a good person. So I'm sure
Look,
she would be.
I'm really sorry if I'm really bad at this.
Hey, no worries. No worries at all. I mean,
It's like, look, I can't. The problem is that I can't easily answer those questions.
yeah,
This
she
is-
she clarified that she wasn't. It wasn't pointing at you. It was pointing about what Pragmatic Crystal was saying. So just to clarify, and yeah, they like that you called in. I don't think that people in my audience are rude or toxic. So you're still more than welcome here.
Mhm.
I appreciate you calling in, Caden. So I
Mhm.
do have another caller that's waiting in the wings. Is there anything else that you wanted to say on this topic before we move on?
Okay, so I guess, like I said, it's not easy to answer a question like that because it's like, well, it it you have to start getting outside of the logic to start answering those kinds of questions. And for the most part, I feel like it's not, like I said, we want easy answers. We want to know things right now. And
Yeah.
it's really just, it's unfathomable to think that there are things that will just be beyond our reach.
I personally don't think that's unfathomable. I think it's very likely that there will be things about the universe that are just inaccessible for us to know about. I mean, I see no reasons why humans should be able to understand everything about the universe. And for me personally, if I'm going to believe in something, I'm going to need a good reason. And that reason is either going to be logical or empirical evidence. And
Well, it's
so if
like,
you're talking about that we have to go beyond logic and we can't use methodological naturalism, then we're leaving empiricism and rationality behind. And all the reasons that could make me believe in something are all going to be rational or empirical. So at this
it's
point,
like,
I'm not
if
hearing
any,
reason, but
to me, it's more rational to believe in a God that put, that made us than to believe in any, this, even,
okay.
there are too
So
many things in the world that are, anything someone says can be considered beyond reason. And right now,
let me just because I do want to move on to the next caller before we get to the 2 hour mark here, but I just want to say maybe think about this because you did just make a claim that it's more rational to believe in a god than to not, and so for maybe the next time we have this discussion, see if you can come up with like an actual argument, like a syllogism, premise, conclusion, and the conclusion would be it's more rational to believe in a god than not, and so you need to figure out what premises that conclusion follows from, and maybe present it as an argument that we could discuss for next time. So with that, maybe just a little bit of something to think about. I'm going to move on to the next caller, but Caden, I do appreciate you calling in.
you're welcome. I'm sorry if I said something that upset you.
Nope.
Please
You
forgive
haven't said
me.
anything that upset me. There's no reason to be sorry. It was a good, interesting call.
I'm also sorry if I was peddling pseudoscience.
No, you're good. You're good, Caden. No worries. No harsh feelings. All right. So next, I'm going to welcome to the show River. River,
Hey.
how's it going?
I'm doing good.
Good. So yeah, I don't recognize you. I don't know if you've called into the
No.
stream before. So did you have something that you wanted to talk about specifically?
Some world news.
Okay.
I don't know where the source is specifically, but I just found it on YouTube.
Cool.
People say there's Russian nukes in what's it called? Cuba.
Yep, kind of a throwback to the Cuban Missile Crisis. There's been a lot in the news recently about Russia and nukes, considering they've been doing like nuclear drills for tactical nukes deployed to Ukraine. There have also been the whole idea of Russians have nukes in space, which kind of actually seems to be true. Like when you hear from the intelligence community, it kind of does seem like they have some sort of weapon in space that is literally like trained to follow some of our military intelligence satellites, which would be a pretty big deal. I hadn't heard of them having like them putting nukes in Cuba, which obviously for everyone that knows the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis would be a pretty nightmarish scenario. So,
And another thing, there was the first case of bird flu, I think, or I forgot what it was called. Some new virus.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of headlines about bird flu recently too. I know there's a lot of paranoia, especially.
Yeah, and there was the first human case, and he died.
Yeah, so kind of lots of people are getting flashbacks to late 2019, early 2020 kind of vibes with that. With that kind of stuff, it's so hard to see it play out. You kind of have to wait and see, but might be a good idea to buy some toilet paper or lessons learned from the last one, right? So,
and another thing was there was no confirmed human to human cases, so
okay,
but you never know, there might be.
Annoying newsletters so that he heard that the Russians are putting nukes in kids' Halloween candy. So kind of flippant, but I think that there is a very serious threat posed by that, because we've kind of seen that Putin is not happy with the current global world order of the 21st century, and he kind of wants to shake that up, and he kind of wants to bring Russia back onto the main stage from the collapse of the Soviet Union. And he's been making plays. He's been trying to gain territory in Ukraine. It kind of seems like he might push past that into the Baltics, maybe Moldova. And as what is pointing out in the chat, still no peace talks. It kind of seems like a lot of these global conflicts are kind of waiting for the 2024 election, because Trump has signaled so much that he's going to end these conflicts very soon. And so that would be on terms favorable to Russia and Israel. So a lot of those powers are kind of doing everything that they can do to prolong these conflicts until we get a result from the 2024 election, which really sucks for Biden,
Yeah, makes it a whole lot more complicated. Well, I see that we reached a 2-hour mark. I think I might have to leave. Do you need to end the stream?
Usually I like to aim for about 2 hours. I was going to see if Leo Filius was going to join us, because he had said that we could go through and analyze my interaction with Frank Turek, but he might be out of pocket tonight. I haven't gotten a response back from him, so we might have to save that for a future live stream, because I think that Leo has a lot of valuable thoughts and insights into the sort of arguments for the existence of God that I talked about with Frank Turek. So, I might start rounding down this stream. Is that most of the news items that you wanted to point to? Some of the Russian nukes and then the bird flu stuff?
Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Yeah. No worries. Thanks for calling in, River. I always like to see new faces call in, so I hope that you stick around and keep watching the weekly streams and call back in with some like news updates that I might not have been able to cover that week. So I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right. So that kind of covered most of the science news that I wanted to go through. I'm grateful for River for joining to discuss some of the geopolitical machinations happening in the world again that are relevant for all of humanity, because again, like pushing the doomsday clock closer to nuclear winter is kind of important for literally everybody. So when you start seeing like that there are world leaders who are willing to tactically deploy nukes to further their own geopolitical positions, really, really frightening stuff. We haven't seen anything like that in the 21st century up to this point. So pretty crazy that that's the situation that we find ourselves in now. Two big conflicts going on in the world, and neither of them seems like they're going to be wrapping up. I mean, this whole week, Biden was pushing for a peace deal with Hamas, and it's kind of looking like they're signaling that they're not going to accept Biden's peace talks. Don't really like to see the direction that things are heading in that form. Like, 2024 could be a pretty tumultuous year overall. I mean, a lot is riding on this current U.S. election in terms of the actual geopolitical situation in both Gaza and Ukraine and elsewhere. There's areas like there's war zones in the world happening right now, like in Sudan with the civil war, or in East Congo with like a city that's completely surrounded by troops that are just sort of waiting to do an invasion there. And a lot of these things kind of depend on who wins the U.S. election, because a lot of these powers are kind of holding off on making any big moves until after that election. So going to be probably a tumultuous year, but on the positive front, the Olympics are coming up. I don't know if you guys really care about that, but for me personally, it's really strange because like I'm a big nerd and I don't really care about sports except for the Olympics. I don't know what it is, but when it's not just like a city versus another city or some made up team versus another made up team, I guess countries are made up, but there's something about one country versus another country where like literally it could be any sport. It could be break dancing, rock climbing, ping pong, horseback riding, whatever it is. I can watch that sport if it's country against country, and I get into the Olympics. So that's like, that and the Wyoming trip are the positive things that I have coming up on the horizon for this year that I'm really, really looking forward to. And then, yes, I think Andrew Cumming mentioned this in the live chat. I didn't highlight it at the time, but I do have some debates planned for when I get back. I will be going on Standing for Truth's channel to debate T-Rock about the Big Bang. I do not envy T-Rock for this position because the evidence supporting the Big Bang is so overwhelmingly strong. I really don't know how he's going to address the evidence from like the CMB power spectrum. For those of you that did not see my video explaining the CMB power spectrum, definitely check it out because it's just pretty much a definitive case for the Big Bang. I really, truly do not understand how anyone can argue with the CMB power spectrum being definitive evidence that the Big Bang happened. So if literally any of you come across any creationist that's even trying to make an argument against the power spectrum, please send it to me because like I've literally never even heard them attempt to refute it. And so that's what T-Rock is going to be trying. And I do not envy him that task because it seems kind of a Sisyphean task to refute such incredibly powerful evidence that this event did in fact happen. And then I also, in September, will be having my debate with Cy Gart, the Christian biochemist, and we will be going through his 3 points that he thinks show biology pointing to the existence of God. So I'm really looking forward to that discussion. And then also, hopefully, within the next few months, when I get back from Wyoming, hopefully Witsit will be shamed into finally accepting my challenge to debate. You guys kind of got a little sneak preview of some of my favorite flat earth arguments whenever well-known flat earther Mr. Anderson called in earlier. But yeah, oh, look, okay, we've got Sydney Raptor here asking if I've bought myself a rock hammer yet because I can't be using docks. I really hope that Doc will let me use an extra rock hammer because I have not bought it yet. I've gotten, the hot weather gear to be hiking in conditions without shade all day long looking for dinosaur fossils. But yeah, so far have not gotten my rock hammer yet, much to my shame. And speaking of shame, witless is shameless. I accidentally read Witsit as a witless, but I'm going to say that was on purpose. And Mark Reed says, there's nothing wrong with two grown men sharing a rock hammer. Yes, that's a true sign of maturity and friendship. When you can share a rock hammer with another grown man. But yes, so I'm trying to get some debates lined up. I finally did get to debate and break my drought streak of debates this last week on Modern Day Debates, and I will be uploading that. I will maintain my upload schedule, and I'll try to get at least one video per week while I'm gone in Wyoming. But for now, this is going to be my last stream until I return. And hopefully we will have discovered a dinosaur fossil of a juvenile sauropod. Or really, I'd be happy with any dinosaur fossil, really. If we can discover a dinosaur fossil by the time that I come back for the next weekly science stream, I will be a happy camper. So yes, that is what to look forward to on the horizon. And I just want to say thank you for everybody for tuning in and following these weekly streams and in getting to share my love of science and history with these streams and with you all. It really means a lot to me, and getting to see like all of the increase in subscribers that have been happening over the last like week or two. Like I shot through 2,000 subscribers. I'm at like 2,300 now, and it's just like completely unreal and awesome. So thank you for everybody that helps make that happen. And yes, maybe they will name it Graciosaurus Rex. That would be really fun. But yes, thank you everybody for tuning in. And yes, thank you for calling in, everybody that did call in. You know, I love practicing my debate skills, always learning new things, always improving and getting better. So this is really like the weekly debate dojo, you know, and I get to try new tactics, learn new things, improve my ability to have these debates. I enjoy doing them. Hopefully you guys enjoy watching them. So yeah, just stay tuned to this channel for the updates for the trip, the updates on whether we find a fossil, and when I'll be returning for the next weekly stream. Until then, guys, thanks for joining. Stay curious and keep learning.